Forum series, joining you today from the territory of the Lekwungen and Wasanich peoples, where I'm grateful to be able to live, work, and study. We're pleased to start our programming for 2021 off today with this important discussion on connecting spiritually with the land and each other, an important foundation for our ongoing dialogue about whether and how we may be able to bring together or reconcile Indigenous ways of knowing and science. We thank you all for being here for this very important discussion today, to join us in holding space to hear from the wise speakers we've gathered together as they share their reflections on relationships to land and each other as guided by spirit. This dialogue is meant to be foundational and the first part of a thread we will continue to weave through our programming in months ahead. Your presence today is vital to this conversation. Before we turn to the session itself, I have a few quick housekeeping notes. Just a reminder that we have turned the chat feature off and we won't be using the raise hands function. Instead, please direct your questions to the moderator via the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We'll gather like questions together for the moderator and address all questions as time allows. And please submit your questions early. Our speakers may have different Wi-Fi connections, so please adjust your volume as needed. Our dialogue today will run for approximately an hour and a half, and we're recording it so that anyone who is unable to participate in the entire session can view it later online. But particularly given the nature of today's discussion, we ask that you do your best to stay with us for the entirety of the discussion. I'm now pleased to introduce our moderator for today, Shaunna Morgan Siegers. Shaunna Morgan Siegers lives in rural Manitoba. She's a member of the Crees of Waskaganish First Nation, situated on the shores of James Bay in EU-Ishchi, and has a long history of living and working with First Nations and tribes across Turtle Island. Shaunna holds a master's degree in botany and has more than 20 years of ethnobiological experience. She's the operations manager for the Indigenous Leadership Initiative and has been a major part of the Reconciling Ways of Knowing Indigenous Knowledge and Science project since 2017. Over to you, Shaunna.
Thanks, Jackie. Wajay, Anamaki Gabi Dewi Dang Disnikas. And to start today's session, I would like to introduce you to Sithiyama, Chief Leah George Wilson of the Tsawela-Tooth Nation. From the lands of the Coast Salish people, where much of the reconciling ways of knowing, planning, and coordination occurs, Sithiyama will honor us today with opening and closing prayers. Chief Leah George Wilson has held the title and office of Chief of the Tsawela-Tooth Nation 4 times since 2001, when she was the first woman to serve in this position. She holds a bachelor's degree in anthropology from Simon Fraser, and she graduated from UBC Law School. Chief George Wilson was called to the bar in British Columbia in 2015, and she continues to practice in the area of Indigenous law. She is a well-known and respected Indigenous leader. Sithiyama, will you open for us in a good way today?
Osian, Haichka Shaunna for that kind introduction, although not entirely necessary. Thank you for inviting me, Miles, and for Jackie reaching out. It is my honor and pleasure to be on such an esteemed panel, looking at all the people that are on the screen today. First, a prayer. I'd like to say Haichka to the Creator for all the gifts that He has given us. Most especially, we're thankful for the gifts of being Wamo in this world, for placing us where we are today. We're asking Creator today for strength and protection for all the leaders in this circle today as we navigate our way through this COVID-19 pandemic, asking you to give them continued strength and courage. Also asking for blessings of healing on our sick and infirm, special protection on our elders and our young people, especially those attending schools in person. Asking you for extra layers of protection on our people. I'd also like to pray for those who have recently lost loved ones, particularly during this pandemic, makes it so difficult for our people to gather like our law dictates. For these and other intentions we have in our hearts and minds, we live with you. Osea. And to welcome you, I'm currently on Slawatith land, ACMACIA, I Tinashqualawan, Quick Snalats, Anthasitsia Ama, the Mana, Quetzanthalia, the Slahotziam, the Amath, Quethan Sakalot, Slahotziam. Meets up, Quitwilam to Tamoch, Tana Huamoch, Slawatath, to Vancouver, Skohomashoth, Womathwium, Slawatath. Greetings to our honored guests and my dear ones. I have good feelings in my heart to see all of you today in our language called Huntkamitnum, Downriver Halkamelum. I told you my name, I told you who my parents are and who my grandparents are, because in our way it's really important for you to know that those pieces of information, because it also tells you that I know who I am. And in our Wamuk world, our First Nation world, that's really important. And I welcomed you to where I am, Tsleil-Waututh, and also to the Greater Vancouver area, which is home to Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Squamish. Thanking all of you for being here today. Osea.
Haichka Sisiyamama for helping us to start today's discussion in a good way. And now I'd like to introduce the speakers for today. First, we have Nagani Aki Inani, or Leading Earthman, Elder Dr. Dave Courchene. Elder Courchene is one of the distinguished project conveners for the Reconciling Ways of Knowing. He is a respected elder and knowledge keeper of the Anishinaabe Nation. He has served as wisdom keeper of the United Nations since 1992, advising in the areas of spirituality and sustainable environmental stewardship. In 2002, he founded Turtle Lodge, International Center for Indigenous Education and Wellness, as a place of learning, healing, and sharing for all people. He has built alliances with institutions, academics, policymakers across the country, and is known for his ability to inspire dialogue and cross-cultural understanding. Elder Courchene's work has been recognized with many honors, including most recently an honorary Doctor of Laws from the University of Winnipeg. And secondly, we have grandmother Katherine Whitecloud. Katherine Whitecloud is a mother, grandmother, community leader, and knowledge keeper from Wipazokpa Wakpa Dakota Nation. Chosen at the age of 16 to represent her people, she has been a spokesperson for her nation for over 30 years, serving in several roles such as Chief and Director of Education with a focus on Indigenous health and wellness. She was also the Chief Executive Officer of the Assembly of First Nations, Director of the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, and the Manitoba Regional Chief of the Assembly of First Nations. Her work lies in ensuring the life and teachings articulated and envisioned by her forefathers are honored and protected. Katherine is a member of Turtle Lodge National Council of Elders and Knowledge Keepers. She is currently engaged in building greater momentum for Indigenous-led Indigenous health systems across the country. And finally, we have Dr. Blair Stonechild. We welcome him to our panel today. He is a member of Muskopatung Saulteaux Nation. He is a professor of Indigenous Studies at the First Nations University in Regina, Saskatchewan, pardon me. And he is an adjunct professor of history at the University of Regina. He attended Quappel Indian Residential School. Dr. Stonechild obtained his bachelor's degree from McGill University before obtaining a master's and doctorate degrees from the University of Regina. In 1976, Dr. Stonechild became the first faculty member at First Nations University and has been Dean of Academics and Executive Director of Development. He is also an author and has many publications, including The Knowledge Seeker, Embracing Indigenous Spirituality, which was published in 2016, and Loss of Eden, The Fall from Spirituality, published in 2020. So as we start this new year in the Reconciling Ways of Knowing dialogue series, we wanted to circle back around to two important things in this dialogue, and these are the interconnectedness and spirituality. We are all connected. This is one universal law among Indigenous people, and scientists recognize this too, although some scientists recognize this in quite a different way from Indigenous people. The second thing we wanted to focus on today was spirituality. It is often missing from the dominant worldview that has shaped Canadian policy, that guides us in our important decisions about the land, the water, the plants, and the animals. Yet for many Indigenous people, connecting with spirit, connecting through ceremony is an essential prerequisite to knowing, understanding, and decision-making at all levels. Although many elders have commented that some Indigenous people have lost their way and now follow the dominant worldview when it comes to making decisions, and that some people have turned their backs on the importance of ceremony. And yet, in other circles, we see a resurgence of ceremonies among young Indigenous people. And so I would like to invite our panel members to discuss this essential and spiritual connection with the land and to each other, and discuss why they are so important to reconciling ways of knowing. Miigwech. And I'll turn it over to Elder Courchene.
Thank you very much, Shaunna. Bonjour, Anin, Dene Magneto, Nigani Aki Nenendigo, Kenyon Dotem, Sagging Donji, and Ishnabenda. As humanity, we continue to struggle in finding our true identity. In the belief system of Indigenous peoples, the knowledge keepers remind us, which means the most important element of our nature is the spirit. The majority of discussions taking place are primarily from a political, scientific, or intellectual level. There's very little mention of the spiritual realm. The elders say, never overstep the beginning. The beginning is the spirit. The spirit is the voice you hear in your heart, and the heart always senses the truth and the need to change first. This is the reason why the elders say the answers you are looking for are within you. The purpose of the rites of passage was to hear the voice within you. It was done by being in the environment of Mother Earth. It was during this time on the land you would abstain from food and water. The elders say, clear yourself for the spirit to come to you. While on the land, use your natural senses to hear and smell the land. Use your sight to see the beauty of the land and touch the earth to feel the heartbeat of the land. When you complete your fast, you see that water and food is really a medicine. Speaking from my own spiritual journey, I have come to realize it is this spiritual influence that has affected my life the most through following the ancient protocols of rites of passage. It was the spirit that came in vision and dreams that guided me to what gave purpose and meaning to my life. Dreams and visions have always guided us. It was through the dreams we were given the gifts we hold today, the sacred pipe, the sacred drum, our languages, our teachings, our laws that come from the spirit and the land. The ceremonies were done to connect and offer gratitude to the spirit. The teachings and laws given to all of humanity best offer definition to the spirit. These laws need to be lived from the heart, from the spirit. The vision quest has been for thousands of years been the rite of passage to manhood for young Indigenous boys. Young women also have their rites of passage, best explained by the grandmothers. Boys become men by being initiated by women in a process that was started by their own mothers. And then at the age of puberty, by going to the land, to Mother Earth, the first woman, the first mother, and the source of life for us all. They reached out in humbleness to the Great Spirit, the highest power of all, to bring them a vision or a dream that would help bring meaning and purpose to their life as men. Without a vision, a boy never truly enters manhood. He remains immature and uninitiated. The boy is missing the deep-seated passion that drives a man to follow the responsibilities of fulfilling his purpose on earth. This rite of passage taught the young boy no one could find his life for him but himself. Mother Earth would be the one who could help him. He was to overcome any fears he may have being on the land. In his quest, he had to connect to the land by feeling the land. It is a time to develop and nurture a relationship with the spirit and a sacred relationship with the land. Once an individual seeks their vision, it inevitably leads to a collective, for humankind to have a collective capacity to work together, taking care of the earth. Each of us has a beautiful gift. We are not the same, and that uniqueness within the human family is there to create a better world. The world is in need of a new thought, a new plan, a new vision, and it begins by returning to the spirit and the land. There is no greater way to show appreciation and gratitude to the Creator than by loving the land and returning the love the land is giving to us. As an Anishinaabe people, we were given teachings inclusive to all life. They are 7 animals that represent the 7 sacred laws of the people. We have always called upon the spirit of these animals, beginning with the law of respect, represented by the buffalo. Respect is to be a giving and sharing people, first and foremost, following the example of the buffalo, who gave its whole being for the life of the people. Love, represented by the eagle, is what our nation should be all about. Loving the Great Spirit, loving Mother Earth, loving ourselves in the way we were created, and loving each other in the highest way, as the eagle brings vision that is always based on love. Through the unconditional love of the Great Spirit, we have all been given the ability to have a vision. Courage, represented by the bear, is to live from the heart, having the courage to be ourselves. It takes courage to do the right thing for the sake of the children, the way a mother bear would die before seeing harm come to her cub. Honesty, represented by the Sabe or Bigfoot, is being honest with ourselves, speaking and living our truth from the heart. Honesty is refusing to lie or engage in gossip about others. It is simply being true to our words. Honesty is never to judge or condemn others, rather to speak well of others, honoring their uniqueness within the human family. Wisdom, represented by the beaver, is about using the gift the Great Spirit gave each of us to serve and build a strong family, community, and nation. Our gifts do not belong to us as individuals. They belong to all the people. It is our responsibility to serve for the good of the nation. If the beaver did not use his gift to build, his teeth would grow long and he would die. Similarly, if we do not use our gifts in a good way for the benefit of the earth and the brothers and sisters of our nations, we too would die spiritually and experience the negative consequences of natural law. Humility, represented by the wolf, is about showing gratitude for life received, never overstepping the natural laws of Mother Earth. Humility is to know that not one of us is ever above or below our fellow human beings. We are all equal. Excuse me. We are all equal in the eyes of the Great Spirit. There is so much we could learn from the wolf. The teaching of humility is especially important for the leaders of the nation. Truth is represented by the turtle. Our motherland is referred to as Turtle Island. To know and live truth is to walk and live all the 7 sacred laws. Living truth means living in the spirit of respect, love, courage, honesty, wisdom, humility, and truth. It is when we live truth that we will know peace and find the truth of our humanity. Our spiritual constitution is written on the turtle. The turtle lives in the water and on the land to remind the whole world of the truth we should be living by. These 7 laws should act as the foundation for anything we create as we build a new world. The youth of today should be offered expanded opportunities of education. These 7 sacred laws need to be established as the basis and foundation for all education. It is through the knowledge keepers' guidance and teachings and the ceremonies that they conduct that youth can be supported in knowing and feeling the land. We must revolutionize our education system, calling upon the knowledge keepers to create an earth-based education as the foundation to all forms of education, complete with teachings and ancient approaches of connecting to the land, including rites of passage for all young people. Learning to read the book of nature gives our youth the best chance of surviving with a knowledge of how to follow the natural laws of nature. After much reflection and witnessing what is happening to our world, it has become quite clear that humanity is suffering from the mindset of domination, originating from the idea that we could control and dominate nature. We have dehumanized ourselves with a loss of value for the sacredness of life. The victims of that are our children and the land. The land is the foundation of life and must be treated with absolute respect. To do anything less, we harm not only the earth, but we harm ourselves. Issues such as climate change, pandemics, racism, violence, mental illness, and addiction are symptoms. The root of our dilemma, which has created these symptoms, is a severing of our relationship with our source of life, the earth. When we lose touch with the earth, we lose connection to our true spiritual identity and a true understanding of our uniqueness, our purpose as humanity, our original instructions, and our duties and responsibilities. The cure for all these symptoms is reconnecting to the land, We take the youth to the land to learn the ancestral ways of stewardship based on these inclusive values, these 7 sacred laws. It's not just about going to the land, it's about rekindling our spiritual relationship with the land. And in doing so, rekindling the spiritual part of our nature and our true identity as humanity. For us, ceremony is about thanking the spirit and the land and creating sacred relationship. Before we go to the land to engage with and receive from the land, we always do a ceremony of gratitude. Showing gratitude rekindles the spiritual part of our nature and makes us kind and humble. Let us be guided by the laws of nature and work together. Let the land, which is full of the spirit of life, be our connection and the foundation of our new world. Miigwech, thank you very much.
Chi Miigwech, Elder Dave Courchene. Now we'll turn it over to grandmother Katherine Whitecloud.
Hamitakepi. Abeta want to kasho upi and kupi dewish wasn't in the pitches. My relatives, we've been given another beautiful day today to live and to do the things that we need to do as our original instructions were given to us. And so for that, I'm grateful to awaken again this morning and to have another day to share the words of my ancestors that I've been blessed with, and to share what I know about connecting spirituality with the land and with each other, which is our topic today. I'm grateful for the words of our dear colleague, Dave, and for all that he shared. And it aligns with all of our understandings, and we can't repeat it enough. And so I'm going to keep on repeating it. So living with our values, the spirit in each of us, in each of our beings, carries innate knowledge of the moral and ethical principles of what should be the basis of our human conduct. We understand these principles as spiritual and natural laws. Each of our action carries a consequence, positive or negative, depending on whether or not we follow spiritual and natural laws. When our actions are according to positive values, our behaviors is noted by the greater intelligence of the universe. Positive thought and action aligns us with the forces of spirit and nature. Spiritual and natural laws are living laws that respond to our actions to support us in our well-being and fulfillment of our greater destiny in support of all life. The opposite is true when our actions are of negative values. When we are not respectful, when we are not loving, when we're not being honest, and when we're not giving or not being kind, it means we have allowed the experiences in our lives to affect our responsibilities to live our teachings and our positive values. Spirit and nature do not align with us, rather will act in opposition to us. And we feel this. We feel this in what we call the sixth sense. When we don't feel good after we know something wrong we've allowed into our lives, or we've done something we shouldn't have. And it's hurtful. It's a very hurtful feeling that we carry. In truth, we carry our own destiny through our behavior. There are greater forces in effect that we as human beings do not have the capacity to understand. And the Creator has a greater plan in which we are only given a small role to play. Many have asked, why do bad things happen to our people? Or why did our people have to suffer so much? Often there's a greater plan or teaching in effect in what seems like a negative situation. The right question to ask should be, what can I learn from this situation? Every experience we are given by our Creator is an experience to learn from, to give us greater understanding of our role in life and our path in life, and our connection to each other as spiritual people, and our connection to all that has been created. Our experience of trauma and genocide as a people should and can serve as an opportunity to show the world our true spirit as a people who have endured and persevered with our beautiful values and way of life intact, despite what has happened to us. In transcending our suffering, healing our spirit, and following our values, spiritual and natural laws, we can teach the world great lessons, how one can survive terrible trauma, rebuild, and flourish again. Our spiritual laws are the original instructions that were given by our Creator and embedded into everything that is alive, that has a spirit. The Creator put its own spirit into us. So when the first human being was created, that human being was created with a knowledge of all the Creator's thoughts, laws, and original instructions, instructions that govern all of the universe. For everything created, the Creator gave an original instruction about how we were to go about living. It was the same for all the living beings in creation. Each was given original instruction. For each people, you and I, the Creator placed all things necessary to support and nourish our lives, to live a good life, and to be a good relative. For each people, the Creator gave an original instruction about how we were to live on Mother Earth as human beings. Each was given its language, its teachings, its way of life, and ceremonies. And here's an example that has been shared by our elders in the Turtle Lodge, our knowledge keepers. Just as a pine tree never tries to convince the oak tree to change its ways, so it is in following the great binding law that the original people never tell each other what they should do or what they should believe. We welcome each other, each following our special ways. There's a great truth, and that is that ignorance of the natural law is the root cause of all human suffering. We must be prepared to understand the root of our reality, both in terms of our own health as well as the health of the earth. We have broken natural law. Only the human being has broken natural law. All else that has been created has lived within the laws given by our Creator. This is the crisis of our time. As human beings, like any other living being, we are bound by natural law. As Indigenous peoples, we have always seen the earth as a living entity with a spirit, which gives her purpose, her duties and responsibilities to all of us. Knowing the earth is alive is fundamental to having a sacred relationship with her. Mother Earth is the greatest healer. No matter what we have done to her, she continues to feed us and offer us her love, her laws, and her teachings that show us how to survive and be healthy. What is natural law and how can we find our balance again? To understand this, we need to first reconnect with our spirit, the core of our being, which connects us to the Creator and the earth. Our spirit gives meaning to all aspects of life, including our relationships with one another. Our spiritual health is the foundation of our wellness. Our physical being, well-being, is a reflection of our spiritual well-being. Our healers always address the spirit first when a person comes with a physical, emotional, or mental illness. Our spirit defines our true identity as stewards of the earth, and we need to understand this deep part of our nature and the sacredness of each of our responsibilities. Natural laws are reciprocal laws that apply to every living being in the universe. Nature operates on a cycle, the circle. We all know this. We are in the midst of the winter cycle. We are looking forward to rebirth and regrowth when spring blesses us again. And then we'll move into fall, summer, and then into the autumn again. Just as we are born new and we go through our cycle of life. The most commonly understood natural law is this law of the circle. This law says that whatever we put into our circle returns to us multiplied. It is one of the first lessons taught to me as a child that whatever I do impacts my family and will come back to impact all of us and all of our relatives. Another way of explaining this natural law is what you do to the earth, you do to yourself. What you do to others, you do to yourself. Our elders warn, be careful what you put into your circle. If you harm any living beings, nature dictates there will be consequence, which could be realized not only for yourself, but also your children and your family and your descendants. There is a natural law which we were reminded of in ceremony in 2008 by our late elder Clifford Skeed from Treaty 3 Anishinaabe Territory. It roughly translates as teachings that are given to a child that last forever, that can only be given by a mother, as was referenced by Elder Dave Courchene. This law highlights the importance of the role of the mother, the grandmother, and ultimately Mother Earth herself, as carrying the leadership and responsibility in providing education and teachings on our way of life and ceremonies to our children. Our grandmothers teach us, as does our grandmother Earth. We only need to listen and to watch. Implementing this law is one of the primary responsibilities of our nation as we center the children in our lives, as was described again by Elder Dave, about what needs to be done to bring our children back not only into the circle, but for them to learn these responsibilities. Examples of our natural law include how we evolve from the land. We are part of the land. The land is the primary teacher for understanding our roles as human beings. The land teaches us the seven sacred laws. The land teaches the importance of balance in life. She has shown us over the last decade now that man has created an imbalance which she is responding to. And you see that in the tornadoes that have come into our lives, in the hurricanes, the earthquakes, the wildfires that have happened. And still, man is not listening. The land gives us what we need to live and survive. This land provides true healing. We must only take what we need to survive and nothing more unless it is shared. If you take too much, your greed increases. Treat all life with respect and abundance will return to you. Show gratitude for whatever you receive from life, and life will return its blessings. As long as a child is born, it means nature can provide for its life. And if we human beings misbehave, Mother Earth will be the one to correct and bring us back to sacredness. She is ultimately in charge and in control. Our biggest challenge as humanity is to shift from negative to positive values that support the natural laws. That challenge we alert because we've disconnected ourselves from the land, and also we are disconnected from spirit, our spirit. We must make the journey to the land to find ourselves as humanity, to reconnect to who we are as a people, and to reconnect to the spirit that guides our lives. Wopiraya mitakewas. Thank you very much.
Miigwech, Grandmother Whitecloud, for those words of wisdom. And now we'll turn it over to Dr. Blair Stonechild. Blair, you're on mute. If you can unmute yourself, thank you.
Good, the wonders of technology. Anyway, hello everyone. It's wonderful to be with you all here, and I thank the Creator for this. I also want to thank Musham Dave and Kokum Katherine for their comments. This is an extremely important topic, and it's good that we're exploring it. As mentioned, I am a survivor of residential school, and that experience really marked me. There's a thing called spiritual abuse, which has been identified by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and I recall all of the prayers and masses that I had to attend, and it really bothered me because I knew that there was something missing in that. And so one of the most fortunate experiences I had was to work at the First Nations University of Canada, where I've been for over 40 years. And I've had the opportunity to work with many wonderful elders. And I've been interested in the topic of spirituality ever since I was young. And so when I was at the First Nations University and began to interview elders about spirituality, they began to share a lot of things with me. And they also encouraged me to write about it, because they said it's important at this stage that we begin to share these ideas using modern technologies, including books and media. And so I wrote 2 books. The first one is called The Knowledge Seeker. And in that book, I talked about what I understood as the principles of Indigenous spirituality. The second book, which just came out last year, is called Loss of Indigenous Eden. And it was written in sort of as a sequel to The Knowledge Seeker, and to answer more questions that people were asking about the Knowledge Seeker book. And so essentially what I found through the teachings that were shared with me by elders is that we are basically spirit beings. We have to recognize that spirit is real. We are spirit beings who, as they told me, we come from the stars. We came as spirit beings, and we occupied these physical bodies which you see. And in return for experiencing this physical world, there were a couple of things that we were required to do. One is that we were required to be respectful of all the beings that we were here with, because, as they say in our Wisakachuk stories, there was an agreement made with all of the creatures that when we came here, that they would support us, but in return we had to respect them. And so we had to be thankful for the gifts of creation, and we had to be active stewards, and we had to be humble. We were not to see ourselves as being here to dominate or to exploit all of these other creatures, because we all have a spiritual mission, and we are to respect the spiritual mission of all of these beings. And we have guides to help us. They're the 7 spiritual laws, which have been mentioned already. There's the honesty and respect and bravery and all of these things, which I know Musham Dave mentioned. We also have the ceremonies, of course, which are very important. We have the spiritual disciplines such as fasting and sharing, parenting, learning. All of these are tools which help us to continue to keep in touch with our spiritual being and with our spiritual mission and our spiritual obligations. And so the question becomes, how did we arrive at the point where we're at? Because as Indigenous people, I don't believe that we ever abused the environment. I don't think that we ever went down the path that led us to the point at which we are at now. And so that became the subject of my second book, Loss of Indigenous Eden. And in that book, I was forced to take a close look at history and to go all the way back to contact with Europeans. Even at that point, I could see that there was a divergence in the way that we approached or we saw the world. I had to go further back, and I kept on going further and further back. And the conclusion I came to is that there was a divergence in ideology, so to speak, a divergence in thinking, a divergence in the way of seeing the world, and that corresponded with the rise of civilization. So I concluded in my research that civilization itself, which is essentially a paradigm in which we humans see ourselves as being sort of at the top of the pile, so to speak. It's can be traced back to the Abrahamic religions, where there was a special covenant between God and humans, in which humans were sort of given dominion over nature. And it's interesting because you can kind of see that theme referred to in the Bible in the story of Adam and Eve, and the story of Adam biting of the apple of tree of knowledge of good and evil. And in that story, God basically says, he said, you can enjoy any of the fruits of the Garden of Eden, but except for one, which is the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And so when Adam bit of the apple, he understood that it would make him like God. However, the problem is that in doing so, he would also face expelling from the Garden of Eden. He would, by thinking that he was like God, he would find out that that he would suffer and he would have to work. And so it's interesting because one of the first elders that I met at the First Nations University was an elder by the name of Ernest Atusis, and he used to talk about this idea of the Garden of Eden, and he used to say, we used to live in the Garden of Eden, and we never abused the gifts of the Creator. And I thought about that for a long time, and I finally began to understand what he meant. What he meant is that we did follow what are called the Creator's original instructions. We did not abuse the environment. We respected the spirit in all things. We treated with respect and stewardship. And so because of that, we were developing a type of society in which, society and lifestyle in which, we had healthy relationships, not only with nature and the land, but also with each other. And so, this has various implications, which I could go into, but one of the implications, of course, that I concluded is that Adam and Eve were not the first humans. Indigenous people lived and survived for eons prior to Adam and Eve, and in fact, Adam and Eve simply represent the first humans who adopted civilization and were expelled from the Garden of Eden. So once you take a look at the developments of civilization, you find that there is, for example, the hoarding of wealth, which can be seen as synonymous with agriculture and animal husbandry. But with the accumulation of wealth, you also have the development of conflict, and it can be seen that the first wars can be traced back to the rise of civilization. And then you have groups like the Greeks, for example, who are credited as establishing much of the intellectual foundations of today's thinking. Well, it's also interesting that the Greeks came up with this notion of what's called the theory of natural slavery, which basically said that people who were not, who did not subscribe to their knowledge systems and this human-centered exploitation and cultivation of power were liable and could justifiably be enslaved. And of course, what this refers to is the so-called uncivilized, or in other words, indigenous people who did not subscribe to those types of ways. And so you had Alexander the Greek, of course, who became, the first so-called great conqueror and hero of civilization, apparently. Then, of course, you have the Romans with Julius Caesar, who made his reputation and built his power base on the slaughter and destruction of indigenous peoples of Europe. And so it goes on and on. You have of course, the Spanish and Portuguese who arrive in North America, and they carry exactly the same ideology with them. So our ancestors, our indigenous ancestors who initially welcomed these people in North America and the Americas, thought that these people understood our ancient wisdom. But unfortunately, we learned the hard way that they had a totally different way of looking at things. And so, we faced a long history of persecution because of civilization. We've seen the fruits of civilization. Civilizations ultimately are self-destructive because they pit, one human group against another without regard for the spiritual teachings of the Creator. They engender thought systems such as, for example, rationality. Rationality is the prevailing thought system that we use in universities. It's taught in universities. It's everything that you can perceive with your five senses. It's everything you can figure out using your own mind, so to speak. And one of the chief characteristics of rationality is that absolutely and totally rules out anything having to do with spirituality, which again is a fatal error from the indigenous perspective, because we always thought that spiritual knowledge was a higher form of intelligence, which could also be called wisdom. And so, for example, if you take the case of science, it's easy to become a scientist in the sense that, if you have the intellectual capacity, you can learn all these formulas, you can get your degree, you can get a job, you can develop all types of chemicals, et cetera, and do all kinds of chemical things, but you totally lack the spiritual wisdom and guidance. And that's why we see all of these terrible technologies and these poisonous chemicals and other substances that are destroying both the environment as well as ourselves. And so this is what my interest is. The elders encouraged me to use my academic training to further articulate the meaning of their teachings. And so that's what I've tried to do. I'll leave you with two thoughts. First is that Indigenous people have been the majority of world populations up until the 1820s. So non-Indigenous people have not become the majority of world population until the 1820s. That's only 200 years ago. It's also interesting that when you take a look at the development of civilization, it was not welcomed with open arms by the so-called uncivilized Indigenous people. It was forced upon them by conquest and basically imposed upon them. So that's one thought. When you think of the way in which the world situation has devolved to, especially over the last 200 years. Another thought I'd like to leave you with is sort of along the lines of biology. If you take a look at our simian relatives, they're expected to last on this earth for approximately 1 million years. Our trajectory so far, our record so far is about 200,000 years for modern humanity. And so if you take a look in the context of 1 million years, we're basically like a 20-year-old. If we're to survive like the others, we have another 800,000 years to go. And so, you really need to think about whether as a sort of so-called 20-year-old species, we have learned the spiritual wisdom that will allow us to endure for another 800,000 years. I think these are very important questions. And I think that, Indigenous spirituality has a very important lesson and is key to the survival of humanity because, as was mentioned, history is circular. Mainstream people have gone off the good path. They've gone off the good path because they put greed and power. They've allowed that to replace the Creator's original instructions. We need to find our way back, and we can do that by reconnecting with an obvious answer, which is Indigenous spirituality, and by I think through forums such as this, by basically encouraging non-Indigenous people to become allies in this effort to enable us to successfully complete the circle. Thank you very much.
Miigwech. Thank you, Dr. Stonechild, for those words. And before we turn to questions from the audience, we're going to take about 15 minutes now to turn to our other distinguished project conveners. And so at this point in our dialogue series, there's no real formal introduction for these project conveners. Although for those of you that may be new to the dialogue series, you can find a link to their bios in the chat. And so I'd first like to call upon Dr. Nancy Turner, if you would provide some reflections for us on today's dialogue.
Thank you very much, Shaunna, and thank you so much to Dr. Courchene, Dr. Stonechild, and Grandmother Whitecloud for those amazing words. I want to start by recognizing that I'm here on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation here near Nanaimo on Protection Island, and right across the straits from Chief George Wilson, the Tsleil-Waututh. I want to thank her for the wonderful opening that she provided for us. And I want to thank all of you who are attending this session, because I think of the sessions that we've had so far, this is a very special session where we talk about something that is, I think, a key for scientists to understand the reconciling ways of knowing. I was very moved by Dr. Courchene's description of the 7 sacred laws. And I think those are something that bears repeating for all of us: respect, love, courage, honesty, wisdom, humility, and truth. I think that every one of us, no matter what our background is or where we come from, or what work we do, we all can relate to those sacred laws. And I think they would make an amazing set of laws for everyone who is in governance or in academics or just living in any community, to follow these laws. I guess one of the phrases that jumped out to me right away was Dr. Courchene's, "The spirit is the voice you hear in your heart." I think that is so beautiful, and it expresses so much of what we've been talking about. And the other word that he said, which is a simple word, beauty. I think this may be the way that science and Indigenous knowledge can really connect and understand each other, because all of us appreciate beauty. Scientists appreciate beauty. Everyone appreciates beauty and all that it stands for. And so I think there are many kinds of ways that we can think about reconciling ways of knowing, but maybe it can all come together under that one concept of beauty. And I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. And next I'd like to call on Kilsley Kaji Singh, Miles Richardson of the Haida Nation. Would you please give us some of your reflections for today?
Thank you, Shaunna. Hawa. And also I want to thank Chief Leah George Wilson for opening us in a proper way with proper ceremony and reminding us of the importance of that in everything we do. These speakers have been amazing, and I'm grappling with what they're saying. When Nancy Turner talks about beauty, I think in the same vein, I'm trying to come to terms with truth. And maybe we're talking about the same thing. Indigenous people, I've observed, every Indigenous group bases their culture on their understanding of the Creator's original instructions. And I say the Creator because we all understand that there's only one Creator. There's not a Creator for me and a Creator for you. There's one Creator who gives us as humans original instructions. And we're going to find our way back to the spiritual path that each of you are talking about, the immense power of that spiritual path. We're going to have to come to terms and come to some understanding of that truth, because one of the problems, one of the challenges I observe in today's world, what Blair Stonechild says is guided by greed and power, is everybody creates their own truth and they call it truth. It's not truth, but they call it truth and they call it facts. And they create it to serve their agenda, whether it's a religion or an economic system or a nation state or whatever. Everybody, there's no common hunger or pursuit of what we term that truth. And in this dialogue of reconciling ways of knowing, we're trying to create a dialogue between this Indigenous way of knowing and the science-based way of knowing. And I'm just thinking of, how do we get back there? How do we create that hunger for truth and dig down to our common humanity, and then into our common being each a part of creation. Anyway, I'm got more questions than answers, and I'm hoping I'm spurring something in the speaker's mind that we could help to contribute to this dialogue. But how do we pull scientists into this search for the truth, David?
So we'll move on to Dr. David Suzuki, if you'd like to join in. If you're speaking, Dr. Suzuki, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Well, first of all, I'm speaking to you from the traditional unceded territory of the Coast Salish people, and I gather the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh can duke it out over whose actual territory I'm on. But I always cite them to thank them for providing a model for how one can live in balance for thousands of years. This has been, I think, by far for me the most enlightening program of the whole series that we've had here. And I thank you all. Thank you, Blair, for giving us a way of seeing how we got to where we are now. But I think Katherine and Dave, you've just outlined a path off the destructive path that we're on right now. And I'm so excited about how we can incorporate your ideas. I'd just like to give you a slightly different take on how we got here. First of all, Blair, you say that we're an adolescent species. I think that we're a baby. We're just learning to crawl as a species. Most species have a survival time of about 2 million years. We've been around for 150,000 years. We think that dinosaurs were losers because they suddenly disappeared from the fossil record, but they were around for 150 million years before they died off. So we're just this absolutely infant species. From my standpoint, I think our problem is that very recently we have changed the way that we see ourselves on the planet. For most of human history, we understood that we were a small strand in a very complex web of relationships with all other species of animals and plants, with air, water, sunlight, soil. This was the view of ourselves, and in that complex web, we had responsibilities to ensure that we didn't destroy those webs that were keeping us alive and well off. That's what ceremony has been throughout our time, to acknowledge our gratitude for the abundance and generosity of nature, and recommitting ourselves each time to fulfill our responsibilities. I think the beginning of our change was with religion, especially the Judeo-Christian tradition that sees us not as just another species on the planet, but as like God. I mean, Jesus Christ was the Son of God, and he was a human being, and suddenly we're seen as godlike. And that then you begin to see during the Renaissance that we began to really worship the mind. That was the key to our survival. So when René Descartes said, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. It's like my brain is everything. My brain is a part of, is what I am. It's me. And you get Francis Bacon, who said, scientia potestas est. Knowledge is scientia, science. And that knowledge is power. And he saw the use of science, our knowledge, as a way of increasing human dominance of the planet. Because if you look at Genesis in the Bible, I'm an atheist, I'm not a Christian, but I have read some of this stuff. And, it says right in Genesis, chapter 128, it says, go forth and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea and the the birds of the air and every living thing that moveth upon the earth. That was it. That was the injunction. Go out, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it. And with the Industrial Revolution, we actually developed technology that allowed us to escape the boundaries of nature, what Dave calls natural law. And I think that's the heart of our problem today. We think that we're above, we're outside this web that we've always known that we exist in. And because we're special now, and because we're so smart, we can now, there are no boundaries to that limit us. So we can now create colonies that live underwater. We can live in outer space, for heaven's sakes. We talk about colonies in outer space, or terraforming the moon or Mars, creating it in the image of Earth and living on it. And we now are engineering life forms according to our design, including our children. We're going to design our own children. We've got the technology to do that. And I just want to give you something which was an attempt way back to get scientists off this terrible trajectory. In 1990, one of the eminent scientists, Carl Sagan, an astronomer, spearheaded a joint appeal to the religious and scientific communities for environmental action on behalf of mankind. It was still human-centric, but it was an attempt to bring the environment and spirit back together. It was signed, this appeal was signed by 32 Nobel laureates and other scientists. The open letter was presented to the Global Forum of Spiritual and Parliamentary Leaders Conference in Moscow, Russia. 271 well-known spiritual leaders from 83 countries signed the appeal. So I'd just like to read a couple of paragraphs from this appeal. It was titled Preserving and Cherishing the Earth, an appeal for joint commitment in science and religion. So here's a quote. The earth is the birthplace of our species, and as far as we know, our only home. When our numbers were small and our technology feeble, we were powerless to influence the environment of our world. But today, suddenly, almost without anyone's noticing, our numbers have become immense, and our technology has achieved vast, even awesome powers. Intentionally or inadvertently, we are now able to make devastating changes in the global environment, an environment to which we and all other beings with which we share the earth are meticulously and exquisitely adapted. We are now threatened by self-inflicted, swiftly moving environmental alterations about whose long-term technological, biological, and ecological consequences we are still painfully ignorant. And then they go on and talk about some of the real crises that we were facing, including depletion of the ozone layer, climate change, global warming, loss of species, and nuclear warfare. And at the end of all of this discussion, it says, as scientists, many of us have had profound experience of awe and reverence before the universe. We understand that what is regarded as sacred is more likely to be treated with care and respect. Our planetary home should be so regarded. Efforts to safeguard and cherish the environment need to be infused with a vision of the sacred. At the same time, a much wider and deeper understanding of science and technology is needed. If we do not understand the problem, it is unlikely we will be able to fix it. Thus, there is a vital role for both religion and science. We know that the well-being of our planetary environment is already a source of profound concern in your councils and congregations. We hope this appeal will encourage a spirit of common cause and just action, joint action, to help preserve the earth. And that's the end of the document. It was signed by a list of, I mean, for me as a scientist, these are like gods in the scientific world. And then the religious signatories are starting from the Dalai Lama right on. Oren Lyons was there from the indigenous community. And it's a sad fact that this had wide appeal to the spiritual community around the world. But in the end, it really didn't go anywhere. And this is why reconciling these ways of knowing, I think, is really vital today.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Suzuki, Miles, and Dr. Turner for your comments. We really appreciate those. And I think I'll turn now over to the questions that have been flowing in from the audience, because there's many questions here. So many questions have been along this vein, so I think it summarizes some of them. I wonder how I can bring these teachings back into my workplace in a way that can be understood and can change how we do our work with kindness. And maybe Grandmother Whitecloud, we could turn to you first to hear a response. And you're on mute, by the way. Thank you.
My understanding of the question is that somebody would like to know how you can bring this into the workplace. And this goes to the heart of understanding our relationships with each other and to each other as original or as people, as spiritual people. We all are born with spirit, and understanding the concept of and leading by example, respect and kindness. And it's incumbent upon, whether you're a leader, what you are commonly known as leaders in the workplace, we all are leaders. We all are leaders in what we share and how we conduct ourselves and how we share our experience of kindness and respect and love for each other, so that others can see that and others can understand. And when people experience that kindness and love and respect, they then are able to reciprocate it, because they say, hey, you know what, that's a really good feeling. That is a really awesome way to relate to each other, to be with each other, to work with each other, and even as something as simple as having respectful conversations and discussion. We find in these in this era that with some of the major topics that we have been discussing of late is racism, especially in workplaces where there are multiple cultures working, that the whole concept of seeing each other as relatives, which is a saying we have in my culture, we are all related, has been lost. And understanding that what we do to others, we bring upon ourselves is something that we learn as children, and therefore live that through our actions with each other. And so I lead by example is my recommendation. Be the one to offer your hand, be the one who offers love and kindness and respect and compassion in your workplace. Thank you.
And Elder Courchene, I'll direct this one to you. We have a question coming in saying, how do we reconnect with our spirits?
You know, I've been asked that question many, many times. The answer I always give is the same. You know, as we make that journey to discover that part of our nature that we call the spirit, one has to go back to the original source of life itself, which really simply means, you know, taking the time to go to the land, you know, to be by a lake, to be by a river, you know, to be in the mountains, and to give yourself this opportunity to be able to feel the spirit of the land. You know, I remember one exercise I did with young children, you know, in order to feel that spirit and even hear the spirit itself, was to take them around a tree, and we would sing to the tree. We would make our offerings to the tree, and then we would ask the young people, talk to the tree. And that was the beginning, you know, for young people to understand, you know, that there is many different life forms, many different living entities, And the trees, of course, is one part of creation. And we need to develop, a relationship with the land, as has been said by the elders of our people. We need to go back to the land, to feel the land, so that we can come alive again. Because what's happening to us, and we live in this superficial world, we have left our spirit behind, and we have to go back. So that, the answer to me is very simple. Take the time, to go to the land. And I've been asked this question so many times, but I live in the city. Yes, the majority of the human population, are within that kind of environment. But there's still space, for anyone to make that journey, to go to the land, to be able to begin to feel the land itself. And when you're able to feel the land itself, what is actually happening, you start to feel yourself, in your own being as a human being. And it's the spirit of the land that you're feeling. And the challenge is to feel the spirit within yourself. Because, the elders say, not only are we a part of the land, we are the land. And then what you feel from the land, you're challenged to feel within yourself. What is that you feel? Because certainly nature has a language, and that language is universal to all people of the world. It's universal. It's not an intellectual understanding of, that communication with the land itself. It's about feeling the land. When you feel the land, it develops a language of its own. That language of kindness, that language of balance, that language of, that is spoken from, what we refer to as the original mother. In our language as Anishinaabe people, we've made in our language, in describing, the earth, we say meteake, a being of kindness, a being of love. And that's what we need to do, is we need to feel the love of the land. Because if we do not feel the love of the land, how can we truly love our brothers and sisters? It's not so much having an alliance with each other, but treating each other as real brothers and sisters. We're all connected and we're all related. And what is happening in the homeland of our people here that we call Turtle Island, we're being called to come forward to share these teachings that we're sharing today. But the true teacher is the land. We just become, a reminder, as ones that have been given this distinction, that hold some knowledge, and we hold very little in terms of the vastness of the knowledge. And even when we make reference to this higher power of spirit, many of the people say, it's the great mystery, because we don't have the intellectual capacity to be able to understand the greatness of this great spirit. They say the great spirit, it's something that you have to feel. And when we talk about the land being alive, you have to feel that spirit of, that is within the land itself. So I would encourage people, find the time, to journey away from the cities for a while. Go and find a lake somewhere and sit there and make an offering, any kind of offering. Where in our culture, we use tobacco as a symbol of giving and sharing. But you can take a bit of food, feed that spirit and ask the spirit of Mother Earth, help me, my mother, help me. I'm lost. What do I need to do in order to find my way back again? And she will answer you. She will answer anybody. Mother Earth has no prejudice. Spirit has no prejudice. Spirit operates on the principle of these teachings. Spirit operates on the spirit of kindness, which Mother Earth truly is, which our mothers truly are, because our mothers reflect that kindness of the gift that she has been given. In order to create and bring life into this world, cannot be brought into the world without love. And that the woman, the mother, understands this. Man has a lot to learn. We're so far behind in terms of, understanding the deepness of life itself, that our grandmothers know. What we need to do more than ever is put our grandmothers into their rightful place of influence to come and teach us, what life is all about. So, elders are important, because they offer guidance and mentorship, not to take away your responsibility of making a decision in your life that you are responsible for. They give you the teachings that will help you, guide you, and inspire you. So the answer is the land. I'm saying a long way here, but the land is the answer, the mother.
Very good. Very good. And I understand that, Miles, you have a question that you would like to ask.
Dave Courchene always just brings up so many questions to me. Dave, you talk about the land as the great teacher. And when I hear that, I hear the common belief amongst Indigenous people in the natural law, that it's based on that, is that each of us as peoples were put in our places, in our territories with original instructions. And no matter how smart we think we're getting as humans, we're still don't have the capacity to do much in comparison to these powers that are governed by this natural law. And I understand that at your Turtle Lodge, you have a project with Hannah Strong and others to articulate as best you can what this natural law is and how we see it in common in terms of our original instructions. And I think that's a really important project, but we shouldn't fool ourselves. And I remember Oren Lyon speaking to the United Nations, and he was explaining from the Haudenoshone's perspective this natural law, and he was saying, there is no escape from this natural law. All there is understanding and compliance. And if you don't comply, if you transgress that natural law, you pay in direct proportion to your transgressions. And that's that's why climate change and all those things are upon us, because we have not understood or adhered to the natural law. And that's what Indigenous cultures are about. That could be anybody's culture on this earth, to have an understanding of what that truth is and those original instructions. And if you seek that understanding through beauty, as Nancy has suggested, or through seeing it as sacred, as David has brought forward, they're all different techniques to get to that same place. But that project that you started about articulating the natural law, I think, is a really good one at Turtle Lodge. Thanks, Shaunna.
Thanks, Miles. Dave, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I was so hoping that Miles, would quote this famous quotation, in giving real meaning to transgression, and also to bring a real good understanding of compliance. I think it really tells it all. But, we've been involved with many people from around the world, trying to carry the voice of our people and the importance of, returning back to the original instructions. And Hannah Strong, has been one individual that I've been very fortunate, to meet and engage with other initiatives around the world. And, she developed a project called Restorative, how to restore, the earth back to its original form. And her idea, and I totally agree with this, is that we have to create an initiative, that really positions our young people to be given the support, to go to the land. I know that Miles, and others, we've been on this journey, dealing with, guardianship, across the country. And we have to continue to pursue that vision, that we need to take our children, and I mean all children. I'm not talking only about Indigenous children, because as Indigenous people, when we do something, we do it for all children. And the children were born with rights, that every child was born with rights. Every child was born with the right to have good parents. Every child was born to be given all what it needs in order to be able to grow and live their life. All children are born with the right to be loved. All children are born to be told the truth. And I would think, what is being reflected in today's world, the truth is not being told to them. Something else is being told to them. And that is why we suggest and continually try to inspire those in a position of influence and power, support those initiatives that Indigenous people are defining right now. That we have to revolutionize the whole education system and put the foundation of education based on values, based on how, we should live and behave as human beings. And part of that, of course, is the guardianship or initiative that, we teach our children how to take care of the land. And how we do that, we depend on the people that know the land, to guide and mentor these young people. And they have to feel the land. They can grow up after to be these leaders that would say, well, I felt the land. We can't continue to do what we're doing right now, destroying the earth, because they will have that opportunity to be able to feel that love of the land. And what it is, it's the love of the land, the love of your brothers and sisters, the love of life. It's not an intellectual thing. And that's what's so beautiful about the land. You don't try to debate with Mother Earth. You got to open your heart to feel that love that she has, and she has her own language. And we can all understand that universal language of Mother Earth that comes to the heart, that grabs those teachings, how we should live and behave as human beings. So again, you'll hear Indigenous people like today, how we talk about the significance of spirit. And that's a big challenge for us. And people say, well, what is that? What is spirit? So we're challenged right away. How do you intellectualize spirit when it cannot be intellectualized? It's something you got to feel. And what we always talk about is the land, because that is where the spirit is felt that we're talking about, is on the land itself. And why that we have to position our mothers, our grandmothers back into their rightful place of influence. To do anything less, we ain't going to move forward. We have to put them back, and it is our responsibility as men to ensure that that voice of the women are put in their place, that they can influence all of us and all our children, and how how we take care of life. It's very simple. Thank you.
Yeah, Miigwech. And we have only time for one more question, and so I'll direct this question to Dr. Stonechild. We've had a participant ask, she mentions she's raised outside of her own nation, and but she learns another way to do ceremony in that territory, and she wanted to know, your thoughts about this and the appropriateness of learning other Indigenous ceremonies and practicing that in another land. You're on mute, Dr. Stonechild.
Yes, that's certainly a good question. And, of course, traditionally we were all connected to our own lands, right? And we learned the ceremonies, we learned the connections to our own land. But things have changed, and the reality is that many of us are displaced. And so I think that that's one of the challenges that we face as Indigenous people, is to learn how to cope with, with these modern challenges. It's just like how the elders told me that traditionally all of this Indigenous knowledge was learned through ceremony, and it took time to learn. But today it's different, right? We need to adapt, and we need to actually put these kinds of into spiritual teachings into curriculum, for example, into schools. And so that's the big question, is how do we do that? And so, I would always say that the way to do it is through proper protocol, which is, to consult elders, to pray, meditate, reflect, ask for guidance from spirit. And, we will get the answer. But it's a challenging situation because we have so many youth who have been disconnected from their roots and their culture, and this is one of the things which I'm trying to address. I actually have a third book in the hopper. It'll be actually the third book in the series of the two books I mentioned. And as I mentioned in the first book, I attempted to explain the nature of Indigenous spirituality. In Loss of Indigenous Eden, I basically looked at the past to see, why it is, how things have sort of evolved and developed in terms of why Indigenous spirituality has been sort of sidelined. This last book will be one that looks at the future and looks at the role in which Indigenous spirituality can play in helping to solve the problems which we face. And of course, that's one of the ones that's an issue of, how do we recover our own spirituality? But not only that, of course, the other issue there is, how do we enable other non-Indigenous people to recover their spirituality? And one of the things I believe is that, those non-Indigenous people still have genetic memory of their spirituality, because it hasn't been that long ago since they have become non-Indigenous. And so it's a big challenge. These are questions which I think are looming. And I think these are questions that somehow, the elders and knowledge keepers, we need to come up with more answers because it is a critical question.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Stonechild, for that answer. And I apologize that we don't have more time together to hear from all of our distinguished panelists today and our project conveners, because it's such an important topic, and we can see from the questions coming in that so many people are hungry to hear from people like yourselves to have a better understanding and to do things in a good way and with that kindness in their heart as well. So I'll just let participants know that this is the first part of our ongoing discussion, and we hope to get to all of your questions throughout the upcoming dialogues as the months come. And so now for our closing, I would like to turn it over to Chief George Wilson for the closing prayer. Miigwech.
Shaunna, I'd like to thank you for doing such a wonderful job moderating this session. I've really enjoyed it. I'd also like to say that I had an incredible time listening to the dialogue session. I'd like to thank Elder Dr. Dave Courchene, who I've had the honor and pleasure to hear a number of times. Thank you, as always, for your words and your teachings. Also, thank you. I can't quite call you grandmother, Katherine Whitecloud, because I don't feel like I'm that much younger than you. I'd like to thank you for your good words. And I'd also like to say I had the pleasure of witnessing your leadership as the Regional Chief of Manitoba. Thank you for your work. Also like to say thank you to Dr. Blair Stonechild for your good words today, and to say that I've ordered your book and I look forward to reading it. Always a pleasure to hear Dr. Suzuki, and nice to meet Dr. Nancy Turner, and always a pleasure to listen to Miles Richardson, who I've had the honor of witnessing his leadership in British Columbia for more years than we should be counting out loud, I think. I just want to say, from the perspective of Tsleil-Waututh, I really enjoyed listening to all of the teachings from other areas that are so similar to our own, in particular, the responsibility of our stewardship of our land and our water. Tsleil-Waututh, although we're so urban, we understand that that's our original instruction from the Creator, and we take that seriously. And that's why Tsleil-Waututh, with a population of 600, opposes Trans Mountain Expansion Pipeline, because it's our responsibility. It's part of our legal tradition. It's part of our Snuayeth. It's part of our law. I'd also like to say that to Dr. Suzuki, who lives within the shared areas of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, that never to fear, we are not duking it out over whose territory that you are on. We are acknowledging each other, and that in this world is really important. That's part of that kindness that we've heard so much about. Also, in this COVID period, I'd like to say there's been a ray of hope in Tsleil-Waututh, with our children having to return to public school. Our parents asked us to expand our band school, which was just previously for high school, to include elementary school, which we did. So our children are attending a land school where they're connecting with our land, as our grandnephew calls the jungle. He's going into the forest every day, and they're reconnecting with our land. And we know with that, there is always hope. So in closing, I just want to say, let us give thanks. Give thanks for today. Give thanks for all of the people that have been listening, thanking the elders and the knowledge keepers for the words that they shared, knowing that you have touched people, you have changed lives. It's really important for us to be thankful for the people that listen to their old ones, because that gives hope and love to the future. Would just like to also thank Creator for all the gifts that we have all collectively been giving, and today that gift has been each other and this knowledge. For these and other intentions we have in our hearts and minds, we leave with you. Haitsepka, thanking all of you.
Haichka, Chief George Wilson, we really appreciate you being here today, and for all of your kind words. So in my language, Chimigwich, for your presence today. I know your time is very valuable with all of the crises that we're facing in the world with COVID and with the development issues that you're working. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing as well in your job and with your life, Haichka. So that brings today's dialogue to a close, and I will throw it back to Jackie Miller to give us some more details about upcoming dialogues and to wrap up today's miigwech.
Thank you, and Haitsepka.